What do you get when a Hellfire R9X and the leader of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard get together in an airport? Potentially World War III and over 1,000 U.S. troops dead. On January 3rd, 2020 at 1 a.m. local time, the United States assassinated Iran's second most powerful person and architect of the entire regional proxy network, Major General Soleimani. And we did it with a drone strike at Baghdad International Airport. Not in some remote compound, not in a war zone, at a fucking airport. Soleimani was commander of the Quds Force, Iran's extraterritorial death squad, and military analysts called him the single most powerful operative in the Middle East and a genius of asymmetric warfare. This wasn't some mid-level terrorist they took out. This was like killing the Iranian Secretary of Defense while he was catching a connecting flight, which, by the way, is exactly what happened. Here's where it gets absolutely insane. Soleimani was carrying out Iran's response to a Saudi peace message that Iraq was mediating. Now, you heard that right. Iraqi Prime Minister Adil Abdul Mahdi later revealed that President Trump had literally called him to request mediation between the United States and Iran. So Iraq sets up the meeting, Iran sends their reply with their top general, and Trump kills the messenger. That is weaponized irony. And here's how America turned an airport pickup into an international incident. CIA informants at Damascus airport tipped them off the moment Soleimani's Airbus took off for Baghdad. Israeli intelligence helped confirm the details. American spies at Baghdad airport confirmed his exact whereabouts down to the minute, and then 3 American drones moved into position overhead with no fear of challenge in an Iraqi airspace completely dominated by the US military. Because why be subtle when you can be overwhelming? The weapon of choice? A Hellfire R9X that punched through the roof of Soleimani's armored car. The R9X, and the X stands for experimental, is basically 100 pounds of dense material traveling at 400 plus miles per hour with 6 12-inch razor blades that pop up seconds before impact. This is precision-guided death origami. There's no explosion, no fireball, and no crater, just points of entry in whatever unlucky individual happened to be in its roughly 2.5-foot kill radius. Defense contractors have nicknamed it the Flying Ginsu and the Ninja Missile. While Soleimani's convoy was getting obliterated by flying ninja swords at Baghdad Airport, Asad Airbase, miles away, was having the most normal Tuesday night in military history. 2,000 American troops were doing what American troops do when deployed: pulling guard duty, catching some sleep, playing PlayStation, and generally shooting the shit. Al-Assad wasn't just some random outpost. This was the operation hub for Operation Inherent Resolve, the nerve center for training Iraqi forces, coordinating anti-ISIS operations, and projecting American power across the region. It was exactly the kind of target Iran would want to hit if they wanted to send a message to the United States and our allies. Now, back to the evening and event at hand. The 2,000 U.S. forces at Al-Assad had roughly 125 hours before they became witness to the largest ballistic missile attack on American troops in history. They had 125 hours, 5 days, in 5 hours. And while Americans were sleeping in their bunks, Iranian generals were plotting precision strikes with GPS-guided death from above. The Iranians had a choice: respond through proxies like they always did, send out terrorist fighting groups, fire rockets onto the base, harass the base with maybe some mortars, small arms fire, or go full power flex and launch ballistic missiles directly from Iranian soil at American forces. And they chose option B. So now you have 2,000 Americans at Al-Assad with a target painted on their backs. And here's what happened. US intelligence reports start flooding in, showing Iran moving massive weapons into position. We are talking Feta 313 missiles, each one carrying a 1,000-pound warhead. And they were all pointed at one target: Asad Airbase. An Army intelligence officer looked at this data and delivered the assessment to the base command. Their intention is to level this base, and we may not survive. Imagine getting that news. What would you do if you got that news? And here's where the bad news compounds. The bunkers at Al-Assad were built to withstand 60-pound rockets. And when you're staring down 1,000-pound warheads, that's not protection. That's just wishful thinking. 7,000 miles away in Tampa, General Frank McKenzie is looking at his screens and facing an impossible equation. Evacuate too early, and Iran will adjust their attack plans. Wait too long, and you have another Pearl Harbor on your hands. An all-out war, potentially a world war, hanging in the balance. And through satellite feeds, McKenzie watched Iranian crews fill their missiles with fuel. Now, Iran was also watching Al-Assad through commercial satellite feeds, but their access came in batches, windows of time, and there was gaps between those moments. And those gaps, that was McKenzie's only shot at an undetected evacuation. Back at Al-Assad, while Mackenzie was playing satellite chess with Iranian missile crews, soldiers and airmen were doing what you would expect people to do when they think that this is the end. Major Johnson turned on his phone to record what might be his final goodbye to his son.
Hey buddy, if you're seeing this video, some bad things happened to Dad last night. So I need you to be strong, okay? For Mom. And just always know in your heart that I love you, okay? Bye, buddy.
And then it happened. Iran's satellite imagery hit a period of downtime. Mackenzie saw his window and the evacuation began immediately, but not everybody could leave the base. Intelligence reported a possible ground attack following the missile strike. To fight that off, key personnel had to stay behind. They had to sustain through the missile attack, accept whatever losses they had, and fight whatever came next. That's what they were told. Air Force Master Sergeant John Haynes faced the hardest decision of his career. He looked at his staff and he asked, "Who's our youngest? Let's get them out of here." The youngest, in his mind, would live to fight another day. They were the future of the Air Force. Lieutenant Colonel Stacy Coleman, the Air Force commander at Al-Assad, said, "I thought that would be the last day that we woke up, saw the sun, and sucked in a big gulp of oxygen." The final tally, 1,000 troops evacuated and 1,000 had to stay behind. January 8th, 1:34 a.m., the countdown reached 0. And here's what's really insane about this whole thing. This actually happened while we were all worried about our 401ks and whether our favorite show got renewed, about this new virus we were hearing about in the news. Real people were making impossible choices with math that doesn't lie and consequences that don't care about what's fair. You want to know what real terror looks like? It's Master Sergeant Haynes patrolling in his armored vehicle when the first missile hit 75 yards away. He described the explosion like old videos of Hiroshima. The bright light, the cloud, the brightness that burns itself into your retina. Major Johnson got knocked unconscious by that first blast. When he came to, his first sergeant was screaming, "Everything's on fire. We've got to get out of here." Fire was rolling over the bunkers 70 feet in the air, and they had minutes before they would literally cook to death. So Johnson does what any rational person would do. He sprints across open ground looking for better cover. And that's when the loudspeakers start again.
Incoming, incoming, incoming.
The missiles sounded like freight trains roaring overhead, freight trains filled with explosions. And eventually Johnson found a bunker, but here's where the economics were broken, the economics of panic. He had 40 people trying to cram into a bunker built for 10. And Johnson found himself dead last in line, which in missile attack terms means you're about to be a statistic. So he grabs the guy in front of him and just starts shoving everyone inside. When survival becomes a math problem, decor goes out the window and everyone must fit. Meanwhile, Army Sergeant Kimo Keltz is holding his position in a guard tower because someone has to watch the perimeter. A salvo explodes 30 yards away, close enough that the blast lifts him 2 inches off the floor. He curls into the fetal position to protect his vital organs, and that is not cowardice. That is doing your best to remain combat effective and stay alive under insurmountable odds. And for 80 minutes, this continues. 80 minutes of what can only be described as hell with a timer on it. And can you imagine? Can you put yourself in their shoes of the unknown? You don't know 80 minutes is the timer. You don't know how many of these ballistic missiles are incoming. You don't know what's coming after. And after that 80 minutes, silence. The morning was filled with flames and wounded Americans, coupled with that particular kind of fear that comes after you realize that you might have actually survived something that should have killed you. In the end, Iran fired 16 missiles. 11 found their target at Al-Assad. And as that smoke cleared and Americans crawled out of their bunkers, something remarkable happened. Something that defied every calculation, every probability model, every piece of military wisdom about what happens when 1,000-pound warheads meet human beings. No one was dead. There were casualties, there were hundreds of brain injuries, TBIs, but no one dead. And think about that for a second. 1,000 airmen and soldiers stood their ground against what was essentially just total war. They had no air support, no missile defense system. No one was coming. They had no advantage except the hope that enough of them would survive to fight off a ground offensive attack. This wasn't strategy, this wasn't tactics, this was 1,000 people doing their duty and committing to their service. And you have to ask yourself if you would do the same. Would you stay? We don't know, because we're not one of those 1,000. And to those men and women, I just say, well done and thank you.